The story of Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr initially decided to immigrate. And he decided to accompany Uthman and the people to go to Abyssinia. But on the way to the ship, on the way to Jeddah, they passed by the neighboring tribe. The leader of that tribe was Ibn al-Daghina. Ibn al-Daghina was the leader of that tribe. And the tribe name is not known, so is not known to us here, so we're not going to confuse you more with more and more names. The main point is the leader or the chief, Ibn al-Daghina, he saw all of them leaving. So, and they packed their bags, they have all of the camels loaded. So he said, "Where are you going?" So they said, "We're going to Abyssinia." He said, "Why?" So they explained, "Where our people have tortured us, they have not allowed us to worship, and we are all going to a land where we can worship Allah." Now Ibn al-Daghina had used to have a good partnership with Abu Bakr in buying and selling. He was somebody whom Abu Bakr knew personally. So Ibn al-Daghina, when he saw out of all of these people, he picked on Abu Bakr and he said, "Someone like you does not deserve to leave the land of Mecca. And if your people have persecuted you, then let me intercede on your behalf. And let me go and talk to them and give you my protection." Now remember, the whole Jahili system is based on who's going to protect who, right? And the tribe of Abu Bakr has basically accepted that they're not going to protect Abu Bakr anymore, okay? And so Ibn al-Daghina said, "Let me go and negotiate on your behalf. And maybe they'll take my protection so that they're not going to harm you." And so Abu Bakr said, "Okay, let's give it a try." So Abu Bakr and Ibn al-Daghina returned back. The rest of the Sahaba emigrated to Abyssinia. And Ibn al-Daghina entered Mecca and he approached the Kaaba, and it was the time that everybody sits. As we said many, many times, they had an afternoon time where basically when everything is over in the day, you come and you sit in front of the Kaaba. And Ibn al-Daghina announced that, "O people of Mecca, would you accept it if I offered my protection to Abu Bakr?" Now notice, he cannot do so instantaneously because it's the land of Mecca. And Ibn al-Daghina is not from the Quraysh, he's from another tribe, right? And so it's like a neighboring country saying, "This is our citizen, can he live amongst you? And he has our rights." It's as if he's my tribe member. So this is an adoption, if you like, right? So Ibn al-Daghina said, "I'll adopt Abu Bakr, let him live amongst your own people." Like basically, imagine America going to Canada, the Canadian government saying to America that, "Okay, look, forget his American citizenship, pretend he's a Canadian," right? That's basically what's happening here. That Ibn al-Daghina is saying that, "Let me offer my protection to Abu Bakr, but then he needs the permission of the Quraysh. Are you going to accept?" And Ibn al-Daghina was a trading partner. Ibn al-Daghina was the chieftain of a neighboring tribe, the tribe that is next to Mecca. And so they basically had to agree because it's a neighboring tribe. And they wanted to just make him happy. So they said, "Okay, we will accept your protection for Abu Bakr." And therefore Abu Bakr did not emigrate because of Ibn al-Daghina. However, they said to Ibn al-Daghina, "We're only going to allow this with one condition. And that is, Abu Bakr cannot pray publicly." Because Abu Bakr was of the elite of the Quraysh, and before this, he would pray in front of the Kaaba. And he was of the few people who was brave to pray in front of the Kaaba. Everything changed with the conversion of Umar. When Umar converted, then Muslims could pray in front of the Kaaba. Before that time, you had to be a really brave person. And it was really only the Prophet who would regularly pray. Once in a while, Abu Bakr joined him. So they said, we're not going to allow Abu Bakr to pray publicly. And if he agrees to this, we'll agree to your protection that he can do as he pleases in private, but not in public. And therefore the Quraysh agreed and Abu Bakr agreed. And therefore what he decided to do was, he was the first person to ever build a masjid. This is what it says. The first person to build a masjid. He didn't build a masjid structure, he basically extended his house and he made a room into his place of worship. Right? Because they didn't allow him to worship publicly, so he decided to make a public masjid. Right? He's using the loopholes here. So he builds an extension of the house and he begins praying in that extension. And he prays out loud because it's his house, and the condition was he can pray in his house. Right? So he's basically reading through the lines here. He builds an extension, he makes a masjid, and then he starts praying out loud in his house, which is now a masjid. Obviously what's going to happen? The people, Abu Bakr's tilawa was a very gentle tilawa. And Abu Bakr's recitation of the Quran was a very melodious recitation. And Ibn Ishaq says, the women and the children would gather around in amazement listening to Abu Bakr's recitation, because it was a beautiful recitation. And his own daughter Aisha tells us that Abu Bakr كان رجلا بكاء. He was a man who very easily began to cry. And he would weep from the fear of Allah. And so when he recited the Quran, he would cry and he would beg Allah for forgiveness. So it's a very emotional recitation. So the people began to gather around his house every time he's praying. You know, it's a small city, it's a quiet time at night. You're reading Fajr or Maghrib or Isha or Tahajjud. Anybody walking by can hear you. You know, it's dead silent. It's not like the city. You know, it's like the houses are far, far away. It's a small, you know how it used to be in those days. Many of you might remember from back home, still houses are small, narrow alleyways. So Abu Bakr's recitation is going 5 blocks, let's say, right? Because that's what a block is for them. You know, each houses are there. So people began gathering outside of his house. Now technically the condition was he could read in his house. And that's what he did. But this got to a point where they sent a messenger to Ibn al-Daghina. And they said, we have to take back our condition. He cannot even pray in his house. SubhanAllah. We have to take back our condition. He cannot even pray in his house. You have to tell him to stop praying even in his house. So Ibn al-Daghina came to Mecca. When the messenger came, Ibn al-Daghina came to Mecca, and he said to Abu Bakr that, "Oh Abu Bakr, I have no choice except to ask you to stop praying even, or allow me out of this protection, because I can't give you that type of protection." Right? You have one of two choices, that you either stop praying, or I can't protect you anymore. Obviously, I don't need to tell you which one Abu Bakr chose, right? So he said, I throw back your protection to you, and I accept the protection of Allah. I throw back your protection to you, that you're free now, you have done your job, you did it now, you couldn't stand up basically, because Ibn Daghina didn't fight at all, he just basically agreed. And in one sense we understand, because it's not his territory, it's not his, and he's really going out of his way to help Abu Bakr. So Abu Bakr said, okay, thanks but no thanks. Take your protection back, and I trust in the protection of Allah. And after this, he was in Mecca without any protection other than the protection of Allah. And that is why I told the story 2 weeks ago, that when Abu Bakr came to protect the Prophet, they almost beat him to death. And nobody lifted a finger, because he was not under anybody's protection. Right? I told you the story 2 weeks ago, that somebody came and tried to choke the Prophet. Abu Bakr came and pulled it out, and I said, أَتَقْتُلُونَ رَجُلًا أَنْ يَقُولَ رَبِّيَ اللَّهِ. Are you going to kill a person just because he said Allah is my Lord? And they began beating him until he was the equivalent of hospitalized. He was immobilized for more than a week, and he could not move in his house because of the severity of beating. How could they get away with this even though Abu Bakr was Qurashi? Because his own sub-tribe had basically withdrawn, and Ibn Daghina had withdrawn. So now he is a homeless person, and he's living at his own risk, and he continued to live at his own risk until the Prophet ﷺ emigrated to Medina.